Posted by Dr. Octagonopus 14 years ago. Okay, this is 100% true, even though most people I tell this to in real life don't believe me. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times, and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night, I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on the front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing, moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept towards the bay windows of the living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood, and holding up a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, but was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way, trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open, and said, "See, there's nothing." To this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us and slowly stood up with the knife. My dad slammed the door and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing, and she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her that the police were coming, and she freaked out, grabbed the knife, and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into one of the neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again. Edit. Oh yeah, I forgot after she left, my dad called and warned my crazy uncle who lived next door what was happening. Apparently he was waiting on his front porch with a shotgun when she walked by. He pointed it at her and just said, "Keep moving, bitch." Update. I just talked to my mom. She said that they never really found out the whole story, but apparently she was crazy and off her medication. Her and her husband got into a fight and she tried to attack him with a knife, but didn't seriously hurt him. When he got her out of the house, she cut herself with a knife, either trying to commit suicide or make it look like her husband did it. The police never talked to us about it, so that's just what they heard from the woman's neighbors. Posted by Lurker-turned-poster 14 years ago. I'm not sure how freaky it is, since it's not paranormal or anything, but when I was about 7 years old, I went out on a walk with my babysitter. We were walking back about a mile or so to my house on a fairly busy road, and about halfway there she says, "We should play Simon Says." At first we walked faster, then skipped, and then jogged lightly. Then she says, "Simon says run as fast as you can. Simon says turn here." I was slightly confused, but played along. As we turned down the driveway, I looked back and saw two guys chasing after us, one with a bat and the other with a knife. We ran up to a house, and some old people living there just let us in, thankfully. At the time, I didn't grasp how fucked up it was that we were getting chased, and I still have no clue why we were. Posted by Lithadora 14 years ago. When I was younger, we frequently visited my grandparents around the holidays, even though we didn't live in the same town. My aunt lived 2 houses down from my grandparents. The lady in the house between was creepy. She was a large woman, over 6 feet. She wore logging chains around her neck, a dress, and work boots. The only time I remember seeing her outside was either in her garden in the back or when she was washing the outside of her house, scrubbing the actual building. She did this often. During these times, she would yell at us kids and call us all kinds of things. She would tell us the devil would be coming for us. The adults told us to leave her alone and to avoid her. We would run the distance between my aunts to my grandparents because when you passed by, she was watching out the windows. It was creepy, and we never went alone. One Halloween, One of the cousins dared us to trick-or-treat her house. I remember how scared I was, but I didn't want to be a chicken. Plus, I was going with the group. One of us rang the doorbell, and there was a lot of banging noises inside the house, suddenly like doors slamming. When she answered the door, she had a severed head in her hands, and we all went screaming. The adults told us it was a Halloween prop, and we knew we shouldn't be bothering her and deserved to be scared. About a month later, my parents got a phone call that the lady had tried to kill my aunt when she was bringing in groceries and had my young cousin in her arms. The lady had one of them rope saws and had come up behind my aunt with it. She put it over her head and around her neck and proceeded to saw. My aunt naturally flipped and started kicking the door. My uncle came and beat the lady down with a fire poker. The police investigation revealed that the woman had been digging tunnels under her home, which were coming under my aunt's, my grandparents', and other neighbors' houses. She had been bringing the dirt up and putting it in the raised beds of the gardens. She also had a shrine of some sort underground, which had a few severed heads around it. My aunt survived, by the way, but has a long scar across her neck. Posted by I Hate Addicts 14 years ago. Firstly, my wife is also a Redditor and has been severely traumatized by our recent experience. She does not like to talk about this, so to prevent anyone from sending her messages, this is a throwaway account. My wife and I buy our first house in February of 2010. We immediately fell in love with it as soon as we laid eyes on it. It had everything we wanted and plus a few extras. For the first month, everything was great. Lots of painting and decorating, getting it just the way we wanted. Then, weird things started to randomly happen. First, it was small things, like things upstairs being moved, put in completely different rooms than where they belonged. I chalked it up to my wife just forgetting to put things back where they belonged. The house also started to creak, pretty loud. This is a fairly new house, so I just figured it was probably settling, as most new houses tend to do. One day, the wife and I was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Our stairs sit right next to the kitchen entrance, so any noises upstairs were clearly audible into the kitchen. I turned off the water at the sink, and as soon as I did, we both heard a cough. We have no kids, and no one was visiting. The windows were all shut. The television was not on. This sent the coldest chill down my spine, and I could feel the blood running out of my face. I looked to my wife, and she too had gone pale and had this look of absolute fear. Someone was in our house, and they were upstairs. I quickly grabbed the sharpest knife I could find, and my wife called the police. I walked to the bottom of the steps and stood silently, and heard a loud pop creak, just like the ones I had always heard the house make. My hands were shaking, and my wife was whispering to the 911 operator, telling them we think we may have a robber in our home. The police arrived in minutes. Thankfully, they had been patrolling nearby. The officer walks slowly up the stairs, gun drawn. He calls out, "This is the police. Is anyone upstairs?" No response. I'm right behind him, walking up the stairs. We look into the first bedroom and closet. Empty. No one in the half bath either. Last room is my office, where I have my PC. No one in the room or the closet. I felt the tension ease away and felt like a complete tool, making this officer search our house, only to find nothing. We turned to walk out the room, and right above us, creak. I just about shat bricks. In my office closet, there's an attic access. The officer pulls down the steps and calls out again, "Is anyone up there? This is the police." No response. He turns on the flashlight and peeks his head up. He finds a man in his 40s, kneeling there in the attic, looking dead at him. Gun drawn, he tells the man to come out and put his hands behind his head. They arrest the man. He didn't say a word the whole time and would not look anyone in the eye. He was scruffy looking and had dirty clothes on. Me and my wife were freaking out. I don't think either of us have fully gotten over it. After questioning the man in the police station, we found out that he was a homeless man who found refuge in the house while it was still on the market. He said the doors were unlocked, and so he stayed there. Apparently, a realtor must have forgotten to lock the door after showing someone the house. He said that when people would come into the house, he would hide in the second floor attic, We bought the house, and this guy was living in it for a whole month without us even knowing. It really freaks me out still just thinking about it. Posted by D. Blandon, 14 years ago. When I was a freshman in college, I was on a film shoot near Barstow on Route 66. We were shooting on the property of the cafe known for the film Baghdad Cafe. This property has an abandoned motel attached to it, which is where we were shooting this unbelievably bad horror film. The motel's floor was full of papers, something I initially figured was a relic from the past, while the motel was actually doing business. A while into the shoot, we started picking up the papers and reading them. They were handwritten letters from the 70s, perhaps never sent. They were addressed to dozens of different people, starting out normal, but going on to describe some really fucked up things. This was a guy who literally had some demons. He kept talking about how they were watching him, and the like. The handwriting also got more and more messed up as we assembled the letters chronologically. Meanwhile, outside the motel, there was a storage container with "Keep Out" spray painted on it. Naturally, we were curious. There was a hole in the side, and someone reached in and pulled out some documents. Among them was a letter on a government typeface. I think it was the VA, telling the person who wrote those crazy letters that he was unknowingly a participant of some test of hallucinogenic substance while he was in the Army. This whole time, there was a room in the abandoned motel that was sealed off, that we were strictly forbidden from entering. All the windows were covered by plywood, and the door was barricaded shut. It smelled like death. Seriously, the worst smell I've ever encountered in my life. Here's a link to the picture of the motel in question, with the storage container in the background. Posted by Meta5, 14 years ago. I don't have any way to verify whether this is actually a family story or whether it's an urban legend, but here. My family has lived in rural Nebraska since they were immigrated from Germany in the mid-1800s. Near the turn of the century, disease was pretty rampant in the homesteading area, and it killed off members of almost every family. When someone died from illness, time was of the essence in burying them as not to let the virus spread from the deceased to the living. This meant no wake periods. So an aunt of some unknown number of greats preceding her relationship to me dies of some disease, and she gets buried in the family cemetery on the homestead. The dogs were very fond of her, so it wasn't too surprising that after the funeral, the dogs stuck near the grave. The rest of the family began to think something of it when a week and a half later, the dogs were still visiting her grave almost constantly. But they weren't just at the grave, they were visibly distressed, frantic, and often barking while there. This goes on for maybe 2 weeks when the family decides to check it out. They dig the casket up and open it. The deceased's hair has all been pulled out. Her fingernails are raw and bloody and mangled from where on the inside of the casket door they can see deep scratches in the wood. She was comatose when they buried her, and she came to while underground, spending probably her last 5 days or so alive, buried in a casket. Posted by Charm City Change, 14 years ago. I'm a kid who likes to sleep very much, so my dad often has to try to wake me up as I sleep through my alarm. He wakes me up the same way every time, by gently putting his hand on my shoulder, and then since I usually pled for 5 more minutes, he yanks the covers off and forces me up. So a few weeks ago, I had to get up very early and play pickup basketball in the morning with some friends. I set my alarm the night before and went to sleep. My dad works very far away, so he often sleeps at work 2 or 3 nights a week, and that night he wasn't sleeping at home, so I knew I had to get myself up. I eventually fall asleep, and then I wake up to a hand on my shoulder, murmur the usual 5 more minutes, and then I feel the covers yanked off me all the way off the bed. I shot up out of bed because it was a habit at this point, because this is when I knew my dad was serious. I opened my eyes, and it was pitch black in my room, and nobody was there. I looked around and saw nothing, just the lights on my clock that said it was 2:30 in the morning. I was a little more than slightly freaked out. I asked my mom in the morning if my dad had came home, but she said no. He had stayed at work. Posted by Diggsy. When I was about 13, my mom and dad invited around our previous neighbors from the block of flats that we lived in until I was about 5 years old. Anyway, I'd been sent to bed, but I could still hear everyone talking about this and that, until the woman neighbor said, "Hey, Diggsy's mom, do you remember when Diggsy used to complain that there was someone in his room? Well, there's a family that just moved into the floor above who have a 3-year-old son. He's complaining of the exact same thing Diggsy did." This creeped me out. I had no recollection of any of this. So the next day I asked my mom. Her first reaction was, "You don't remember?" Then she told me all about the weird stuff that used to happen. Footsteps up and down the hall, shit going missing and stuff. She said the final thing to happen was when she was listening to a record one day, and it started to slow down, like someone was holding a finger gently on the platter till it finally came to a stop. My mom said she snapped at this point and started shouting, "Will you leave us the fuck alone?" As soon as she said this, the record went straight back to playing normally, and we never experienced anything again. I've never experienced anything like that since, and these days I'm quite skeptical of such stories, but I believe my mom. Strangest thing is how I found out about it, from someone else 10 years later, experiencing something similar.